Good people YouTube, I'm the Watch Idiot, and my god, I've got a watch that is absolutely insane. I mean, some may even say that it's absolutely mad. We've got the M.A.D1, which is a $2,000 watch, which is awesome, and it's got a MIOTA movement in it, which is a citizen movement for those who don't know. And that, of course, seems like a lot of money for a MIOTA. But then again, it is safe to say that there is a lot more going on with this M.A.D1 beyond just the movement. So in this video, we're just gonna experience this wild watch and just take in all of its glory and the best lume show that I've ever seen, and also talk about the $25,000 elephant, well, more than that, elephant in the room as well. So yeah, let's just get into it. Okay, so let me just preface all this by saying that this was a really tough video to make because there's just so much to talk about, yet also at the exact same time, there's not much to talk about either, just because this watch is purely about the visual feast that you experience. And I absolutely love that, just because, you know, I and most of us look at the practicality of watches for good reason, but I've always said that it's important to have a watch that just makes you smile, since watches are inherently emotional purchases. So this M.A.D1 takes that idea to the absolute next level as just a piece of awesomeness that was made just to exist. And I'm glad that it does exist, because it adds a level of playfulness into a hobby that sometimes just takes itself a little bit too seriously, and it's kind of irritating. And this is exactly what's to be expected from the fantastical mind of Max Busser of the independent brand MB&F. And there he designs and makes all sorts of crazy mechanical creations that just happen to tell time. I mean, he has a line called horological machines, because watches genuinely don't capture the essence of these incredible time-telling contraptions. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to talk about in terms of the brand and the man himself. So yeah, just check out his website. It's such a cool place to be, and just to see all the videos of all the watches and contraptions moving around. It's so cool. So now moving back to the watch in question, and the M.A.D1 was created by Max Busser and his team on the side as a thank you to all the people and suppliers who have, you know, supported him since 2005, since MB&F got started up. Then he opened it up to the rest of the members of the tribe, which is the owners club, which includes the owner of the M.A.D1 that I have with me. And that's why this watch was released so quietly with zero press, just because it was never meant to be a commercial release. It's just a thank you. Okay, so now on to the specs and dimensions, so you can get a rough idea of the scale we're dealing with this watch. And I'm gonna be saying this a lot, but it's unlike any other watch out there. I mean, it kind of looks enormous, which isn't really the case in most aspects. The base dimensions are pretty normal. It's got a 41.1mm case width and a 42.1mm bezel width, alongside a 50.6 lug to lug, which all looks really normal. I mean, it's actually really similar to my Pelagos. But the case thickness comes in at 17.6mm, which is a lot, but also at the same time, it makes sense, and the thickness is well managed because every element making up the height looks to be the right size. And of course, that's also where you're checking the time. So when it's on the wrist, it wears large, but not as gigantic as I was expecting. And a big factor for that is because the whole thing, including the leather strap and deployment clasp, weighs only 87 grams, which is actually a little bit less than a Speedmaster on a NATO strap. Yeah, this was easily one of the weirdest things to get used to, but it makes sense since there isn't a sort of steel block as the case. I mean, it's mostly crystal. The rest of the specs of the watch are kind of irrelevant, but you know, I actually don't know what the water resistance is, probably 30 meters, but I have a feeling that this isn't going to be anyone's daily driver. And the big thing is that it has a MIOTA A21A movement, which sounds crazy, but it was chosen for a very, very specific reason, and an amazing reason, and I'll get into that into the next section. Okay, so I guess an important thing to go over is how to read the time and how to set the time, because yeah, doing these two simple tasks is just so cool. We've got two aluminum rings that go around the entire watch, and the top ring is the hour display and the bottom ring is the minute display. To get a roughly exact reading on it, there's a little arrow pointer thing in the middle, and the time is displayed vertically. In practice, this makes for an incredibly legible display because this is technically a digital display. So on to the rest of the case, and I think the best way to describe this is that it looks kind of like a tiny UFO landed on your wrist or some sort of alien tech. But yeah, we've got a case back, which is really more of an elaborate lug structure because that's really all that's happening here. And the crystal structure of the case is sort of cradled into these claws, and then we connect the straps to the highly sculpted lugs. Also, the cool thing about the lugs is that they leave a big gap between it and the case, which means you can admire the watch from even more angles, and it just looks so much better that way. Moving up, we've got the crystal base, which has the time rings, and then we have the flared bezel, which is the most substantial piece of steel here actually, and then the sides of the bezel are brushed and the top is polished. And it's all just looking really, really good. Finally, at the top, we have the dial and the crystal, but as you can see, it's the movement that you're looking at and the backside of the movement at that. So yeah, this is probably the main attraction here because the M.A.D 821A movement has been modified, highly modified, and finished to a really high standard as you would expect. And the movement holder has a pretty cool sunburst finish on it. The tungsten is an aluminum and tungsten affair, finished beautifully, of course, and it has a really bold 3-spoke design that has enough weight to do its job while still being open enough to be able to enjoy the view inside, and it just looks absolutely mega when it's spinning around. Which brings me to my next point, and that's why they chose the M.A.D 821 movement out of all the available movements. I mean, they specifically chose it because it has a unidirectional rotor, which allows the rotor to spin around freely, and thank God they did that because watching the rotor spin is one of the coolest things ever, and I could just watch it spinning for hours. Oh, and since the movement is technically upside down and backwards, the time technically moves left to right instead of right to left, which is a bit weird, but it's easy to get over in a watch like this, and I wouldn't want to sacrifice anything else about the watch and the way the rings move just to have time moving in the right direction. Absolutely not. Okay, so the lume, and I'm so excited for it because, like I've said before, this is unlike anything I've ever seen and probably you've ever seen. Since the time rings go around the entire watch, you have to charge the watch all around the case, which is something I've never had to do with any of my watches, obviously, and that made for a really cool charging up experience. And also, the watch came with a little black light, which goes to show that the lume is an absolutely integral part of the experience. Once it's fully charged up, it just looks wild because we're used to seeing lume on a flat dial with maybe a little bit of 3-dimensionality there, or at least on a maybe sloped bezel. But here we have a full-on 3D lume because of the stacked time rings that's visible throughout the entire watch and hiding behind the lugs as well. So I must have sat here in the dark looking at this and recharging it for such a long time. I mean, of course, as you would expect, the lume is bright, really well applied, and super crispy. So the spinning rotor from before is super cool in just normal conditions, and of course it's got lume on it, and it's on the outer edges of the spokes, and when you get it spinning, I mean, it looks like a alien spaceship that's charging up some sort of weapon or some sort of beam of light to rapture people or something like that. I mean, it's wild. I'm so glad that they leaned into the lume so hard because if this watch had no lume, it would have made sense to me, and I would have just said that, a watch like this isn't really meant to be used in real life situations of any sort. So yeah, I mean, so here we are with a really legible watch and an incredible lume. So yeah, thank you. Oh, and I almost forgot about the strap and the clasp, and it's a pretty cool one. I mean, it's a sort of whitish, grayish sort of strap, and it's got giant Raleigh style holes in it, and I guess that's just because this is a driving watch of sorts, and it's got 24mm lugs, which is nice to see because they easily could have gone with any other weird odd number, but they stuck with an even number, which is something that a lot of brands should be sticking to as well. The leather itself is super supple, and overall it makes for a really comfortable watch to wear, which might not be apparent when you see it. But also the clasp isn't just your standard butterfly clasp as you would expect. I mean, it's a fully custom clasp that looks just as good as the rest of the watch, which is awesome to see. So now time comes for the price, and is it worth $2,000 for a Miyota, I think that it's worth every single penny, because I happen to love what MB&F does, and I don't think I'll ever be in a position to buy one considering their prices and their small production. So to be able to get a piece of that madness for $2,000 is just incredible. So if I had a good amount of money to spare and I was somehow offered this watch at the start for $2,000, I would absolutely go for it. Also, I think the whole for a Miyota statement thing is absolutely ridiculous here, just because there's so much more to the watch than just the movement, and that's leaving aside the fact that it was specifically chosen to make the spinning loomed rotor thing happen. So I think the watch is worth $2K easily. That's great. But is it worth $25,000 to $30,000 plus dollars? Absolutely not. I mean, I think that these stupid prices came from demand, which is natural because this was a low-key release and a lot of people wanted it and it's from such a special brand. But also, after these were released and after the owners got them, people got to see that, okay, these are going for a huge amount of money. So then that just further added fuel to this resale price. So to pay 10 to 15 times the original price is just ridiculous. And such a pure and well-natured watch, you know, has become just yet another investment vehicle for so many people. And now it's not even being seen as a watch anymore, to a certain extent, which is antithetical to what this MAD1 and to what MB&F stands for. And this entire dynamic is that's a video for another time. So there you have it. I mean, let me know what you think about this watch, what this watch stands for, all that good stuff, because it's definitely a bold and polarizing watch. So yeah, if you made it this far, go ahead and hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, stay on top of everything. And also, you know, hitting those two buttons, it helps the channel a bunch. And yeah, do all that stuff. And until the next video, good day.